Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, the first official Auburn Power Hour of the 2024 college football season. Every Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm going to be taking a deep dive really into the weeds of this Auburn Tigers program. And, whether we're looking back at some film from the previous Saturday or previewing a matchup that we got coming up on Saturday, want to have a dedicated episode talking this Auburn program really for two reasons. One, personally, I just love talking this program. I've been very vocal that you look at the path that this Auburn program is going on. In 2024, they're going to get a lot better. In 2025 and 2026, if Hugh Freeze continues what he's doing, I think you make no mistake about it. This team is going to be competing for SEC championships and college football playoff spots. And I think number two, the amount of support that the Auburn fans have shown the boys the middle of the summer as we're talking fall camp position battles, as we're talking recruiting, it's been absolutely amazing. We can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm going to be talking about a few different things. One, two big storylines that I'll be following during this football game against Alabama A&M. And I think secondly, I want to talk about some surprise players that, maybe is not at the forefront of everybody's minds heading into this football game. That being said, I think have the opportunity to kind of really assert themselves as difference makers for this Auburn team in 2024. I think you make no mistake about it. I think we know how this football game is going to go. And by that third quarter, I think Auburn's going to have the chance to play a lot of players in this football game. I want to talk about some guys that get an opportunity. And I think for lack of better terms, kind of seize that opportunity. Would love to hear some breakout players that you guys have as well in the comment section. Want to get into, though, first, a few storylines that I think we all have to follow. And I think it's first on the offensive line where, we went throughout spring camp and really fall camp kind of pretty confident with what this starting five would be on the offensive line. Within the last 14 days, that's kind of got shook up a little bit, specifically at that left tackle spot where, we kind of penciled in Percy Lewis as a starter at left tackle. Tyler Johnson is coming on strong. Now, I went back and did some homework on Tyler Johnson, a kid that was formerly committed to Texas Tech. Auburn comes in late in the process and gets this one done. Tyler Johnson's a fascinating kid. You go back to the high school film, this kid checks a lot of boxes in terms of the physical traits that you are looking for. He's 6'6", he's up to 320 pounds. He's a former basketball player. The athleticism for that size, you can tell that this kid was a hooper. I mean, the footwork, the feet are very, very clean. That being said, Tyler Johnson lacked a little bit of physicality. And I think that's why he flew under the radar in the 2023 class. And I kind of said, hey, if this kid develops that physicality, you're looking at a starting tackle in the SEC. And now he's up to 320 pounds. I'm assuming he's kind of put it together from that physicality standpoint. I look at Percy Lewis and say, look, Percy Lewis is a known commodity. We know this kid can be a quality left tackle in the SEC because we've seen it before. At Mississippi State, he started the last 6 games, only gave up 2 sacks, 5 quarterback hurries. I think the emergence of Tyler Johnson, there's kind of 2 ways you can look at it. The way I would look at it is that Tyler Johnson's just putting it together. Because, again, we know what Percy Lewis is in the SEC because we've seen it. I think Tyler Johnson emerging speaks a lot more to the development that's taken place with Tyler Johnson than Percy Lewis not being good enough, because we know Percy Lewis is good enough to start at left tackle. And so I think what I'm looking for here is Tyler Johnson. What does this kid look like up at 320 pounds? Does he have that physicality that's necessary to start in the SEC? I think the last takeaway is you're kind of starting to see Auburn develop some depth on the offensive line, which I think is a massive storyline. That is, when Hugh Freeze took over this program, the depth of this roster, specifically along the line of scrimmage, was not in a very good spot. You're starting to see Hugh Freeze develop that. So I think the first thing we're looking for, what that left tackle position looks like. I still lean Percy Lewis because I do think he's a known commodity, and maybe he's had a rough fall camp, but I think Percy Lewis holds on to the left tackle spot. But if you're Auburn, you got this game against Alabama A&M. You can probably get away with not playing your best football against Cal and New Mexico to kind of figure out, for lack of better terms, what your best starting 5 is on the offensive line. That's probably the biggest storyline that I'll be looking at. I think secondly, want to see this team push the ball down the field. And I understand where Auburn fans come from in terms of, hey, why we don't need to put that on the film right now. We're playing Alabama A&M. We can play very vanilla, run the football 70% of the plays and win this football game by 4 scores, which is 100% true. I wouldn't argue that in the slightest. That being said, I'm kind of a fan of putting on the film that this offense can attack vertically down the field, because the biggest problem I had with this Auburn offense in 2023 was the lack of that ability. And you look at how opposing defenses played Auburn. They were just walking safeties into the box. They knew Auburn couldn't push the ball down the field. You look back at the numbers and say, Peyton Thorne only threw 16% of his passes 20-plus yards down the field and only completed 28% of those passes. Auburn was 6.3 yards per pass. That was outside of the top 100 in the country. The lack of ability for Auburn to be explosive vertically down the field in 2023 was probably the biggest problem within this Auburn offense. I want other SEC defenses to see that this is a new Auburn offense, because if you can show, I guess what I'd say is if you can show early that Auburn can push the ball down the field, defenses are going to have to play this Auburn offense a little bit differently. And I think there's a couple of reasons to believe. One, Peyton Thorne, from every report that you've heard during this offseason, looks significantly more comfortable in this Auburn offense, which makes sense. He's going into year 2, and he enrolled after spring practice last year. But I think more importantly, there's actually difference makers on the outside that are going to allow you to push the ball down the field. Last year, who was your vertical wide receiver? Who was the wide receiver that was winning 20-plus yards down the field? The answer was nobody, right? The passing game largely went through Jay Fair and Rivaldo Fairweather at tight end. And let's just be frank about it. Jay Fair is not a number 1 SEC wide receiver. You look at Cam Coleman, a guy that as a true freshman certainly could play that role. You look at even Perry Thompson. You look at Keandre Lambert-Smith. It is a massive upgrade in terms of wide receiver play, but specifically with Cam Coleman, this is the exact wide receiver that Auburn lacked in 2023. And so what I'm saying is I want to see Peyton Thorne push the ball down the field. I want to see them put it on film that this is an offense that if you want to roll a safety into the box and try to take away the short intermediate concepts in the run game, we're going to punish you and make you pay pushing the ball down the field. I want to put that on film so defenses know they need to respect what Auburn can do working vertically down the field. So that's kind of my argument, the 2 things that I'll be looking for from this Auburn program week 1 against Alabama A&M. Now I want to get into 2 players that I think surprise a lot of people. And I first want to go to Malcolm Simmons as a true freshman. This kid's coming late, right? He was not in for spring practice. So a lot of the excitement goes to guys like Cam Coleman or Walker White or Bryce King, guys that were on this roster in spring practice. Malcolm Simmons has come in and just kind of taken this wide receiver room by storm. He's listed in front of Sam Jackson on the depth chart, who also sounded like he had a really good fall camp. I think that tells you about Malcolm Simmons. And what Malcolm Simmons can do is, although he's not the most polished wide receiver like somebody like Cam Coleman is as a true freshman, this kid's got a ton of juice. He's a state champ in both the long jump and the high jump. He has absolute burners when he has the football in his hands. I don't think Malcolm Simmons plays 30-plus snaps every single game for Auburn, but we're looking for, kind of those X factors, that conversation that we've had a lot during the offseason where, hey, Cam Coleman, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Robert Lewis, those are going to be your 3 primary pass catchers at the wide receiver position, with Rivaldo Fairweather at tight end, who are going to be those X factors that you can get the football to in space and let them hit explosive plays. I think Malcolm Simmons could be that guy. You go back to the film of Malcolm Simmons coming out of high school, that is what he did best. He's an elite kick returner, an elite punt returner, a guy that when he has the football in his hands can be special. And so he might not be the most polished wide receiver that you're asking him to run every single play in the playbook. What are some creative ways you can get him on the football field and let him impact this Auburn offense? Malcolm Simmons, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people Saturdays in the fall. And again, I think he's kind of flying under the radar. This kid was a top 150 national recruit. He was a very, very solid player coming out of high school. It's just tough when you come into a class with Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson. So Malcolm Simmons is the guy that I'm keeping an eye on. Then going over to the defensive side of the football, this is where I think it'll be bland, and I don't care if it's bland, right? DJ Durkin is going to scheme up a lot of linebacker blitzes, and we know he's an aggressive defensive coordinator. I don't know if you have to put that on the film right now. The one guy that I'm looking for here is DeMarcus Riddick. DeMarcus Riddick is your spacey linebacker. You look at him and Austin Keys. Austin Keys is a phenomenal redshirt senior linebacker that's played a lot of football and you can trust. Austin Keys is also almost 250 pounds. DeMarcus Riddick, although undersized at 220, is exceptional, not only getting after the quarterback, which I think is a perfect fit in this DJ Durkin defense, but more importantly, he's more of that spacey linebacker. He can operate in space probably at a higher level than Austin Keys can. And when you go up against some of these teams in the SEC that are going to challenge your linebackers from an athletic standpoint, I think DeMarcus Riddick might be that guy to pair up with Eugene Asante at that off-ball linebacker position. I think he checks all the boxes that DJ Durkin is looking for in his linebackers, because DJ Durkin wants linebackers who can get after the passer. But I think when you play teams that are going to challenge you with speed, think about LSU, think about maybe Alabama, DeMarcus Riddick might be your guy. And so when you're playing Georgia, who's going to run with 2 tight ends, you probably want to play Austin Keys. But when you're playing a team that is going to challenge you in space and athletically, and DeMarcus Riddick might be that guy, and it sounds like he's really putting it together. He's going to play a lot in this football game. DeMarcus Riddick's a guy that, again, I think a lot of Auburn fans are talking about him. I don't know if he's necessarily a surprise player, but a guy that I think can emerge as a difference maker within this Auburn defense. So those are the 2 guys that, I'll be keeping my eyes on in terms of surprise football players. But again, we're going to see a lot of these new faces, whether they're from the transfer portal, whether they're true freshmen, take the field against Alabama A&M. My eyeballs are going to be on all of them. Really excited for this game. Really excited to see a lot of the new players, again, whether transfer portal, whether high school guys taking the field. We'll cut it there. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.